Hey everyone, welcome to another exciting edition of the Founders Meetup. Good to see everyone here right now and anyone watching online. We are joined by a very special guest today, joined by Matt Overby. He is the president and executive director at Summit Leadership Foundation. And he's here to share with us some very good leadership tidbits and practical tips and stuff. And if there's one thing I know about Summit is it's in your name. You have the whole leadership thing down. So thank you for joining us. Like really looking forward to just learning and talking and really having a great discussion about this. So one thing we always do is to just go around and have everybody introduce themselves just to have some good context for who is in the room. So let's go ahead and start with you, Matt, and then we'll just go around really quick and we'll get started.
That's great. Thank you. I was trying to silence my phone before I coughed there. Notorious for it ringing in the middle of meetings. So I'm Matt Overby. As Rose said, I'm honored and blessed to be at Summit Leadership Foundation here in Johnson City. Been with the organization for 9 years and lead a phenomenal team of other servant leaders who enjoy being behind the scenes and keeping our partners out in front, encouraged in the spotlight, and equipped to do what they've been called to do. So honored we've known Row for years now, and it's been fun to see their organization grow and the impact and the influence they're gaining and having, and seeing their work all over the place. So proud to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to come and add some value.
Yeah, I'm Ron, just a local ETSU alumni, working on a little app project with a friend and trying to get involved in the startup scene here in JC. So thought I'd attend a meeting and see some cool stuff you guys are working on.
Nice.
Anthony, I own a local medical supply company in downtown Johnson City. Been a part of FoundersForge for a minute now.
Hey everyone, David Nelson, the director at FoundersForge. I also have my own company, Brew Fund, which is an engagement and gifting platform for craft beer. And really excited to meet you guys, a couple new faces, and a bunch returning. So really looking forward to having all in-person events, hopefully in the very, very near future.
Indeed.
My name's Justin, the owner of Black Copper Woodworking, and I build tables, countertops, and different kinds of furniture like that.
Cool.
I'm Chris Guffey. I do mostly his 3D design work for the tables, and I also am a software engineer for the HSN Distribution Center in Piney Flats, and
It's a big operation out there.
Yeah. 1 million square feet.
Is it really?
Yeah.
It was big. I didn't know it was that big.
Big number.
Yeah. Nice.
So it's cool.
That's sweet. Well, I'm Ro, founder, CEO of Action VFX. We do visual effects, we blow things up.
And I'm Luke Thompson. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at Action VFX. Pretty much same thing, except I'm over all of our operational stuff, which definitely teaches good.
I'm Carla Goodwin, People and Operations Manager here at Action VFX, and I don't get to blow things up. We don't like to do any of that. Just make sure everyone's safe. And I'm also on the FoundersForge team.
Liz.
Yeah, Liz Virtual.
Hi, I'm Liz. I'm the Assistant Director at the ETSU Innovation Lab. Here just to offer support and see what everybody's up to.
How's everything at the lab going?
Very well, very well. We've been keeping busy.
Can you tell a little bit about the Innovation Lab?
Yeah, so we are part of ETSU, and we help the entire community, not just ETSU, with startups. We are a high-tech business incubator. So we do look for something with a high-tech component in it when we look at new client companies and members coming in. So currently, I think we have, I might be off a number or two, but I think we have, I want to say 14 affiliate members, 13 actual residential clients who are here on site and have an office. So we're full up, keeping us busy on our toes.
That's great. That's great. Do you also have the algae project over there?
They are affiliate members now, but yes, they're still associated with us.
Nice. Always fascinated to see what you guys are up to over there. It's really cool.
Thank you.
Nice.
We're ready.
Good to go. Awesome.
Take it over.
Let me grab this little clicker. Do we want to switch over to that PowerPoint? Is it? Oh, sorry. On the.
Did you send that over this
Yeah.
way?
It's in. I emailed it to Ro, but is it?
Oh, all right. Did you email it to me?
No worries.
One
And that would be
second.
for the clicker.
Sorry.
No worries. We can chat while that's loading. It's really nothing, super mission critical. I typically use slides more as sort of talking points anyway.
Good to know.
So all of you guys are in the entrepreneur space, right? And I'll tell you that, and I honor and I appreciate and respect what you guys do, because that's not my gift set. I'm not the visionary. I'm not the super creative. My gift is more of the execution, the day-to-day operations, the systems, the processes, the execution of that vision and dream and idea. So I'm always fascinated to sit down and engage with folks like you all. Our founder of Summit, Dave McCauley, is our visionary. He's the one who, there again, 14 or 16 years ago now, had the vision for Summit and started it from his dining room table. And just out of a passion for wanting to connect people that were passionate about similar things, bring down silos in the community, because there's a very natural tendency. And I'm sorry, you're back here.
You're okay.
There's a very natural tendency. That's perfect. When we're passionate about something and we feel called to something, that we get very heads down and tunnel vision and very focused on that, right? And sometimes to our detriment, because it's rare that we often will get a little more heads up and look out on the horizon and say, okay, who else out there is passionate about what I'm passionate about or working in that same space that I need to connect with? And that's one of the core services of Summit, is just connecting the right people to the right resources at the right time. And so finding people who have those similar interests, passions, and we get them to a common table to have conversations and meet each other and introductions, because at that point, several things happen when you can facilitate meetings like that. You get traction, you get synergy, you get momentum, and typically you get trust out of that, because people are willing to let their guard down a little bit, right, and be a little more vulnerable and transparent with people that they feel like they have that commonality in relationship to. And we liken it to kind of pushing a rock down a hill. When you get those folks together, then the conversation will typically shift from, that really is something that somebody needs to do something about, to, okay, when's our next meeting and who's doing what by when, right? So we begin to get that idea of, okay, something can happen here. There's real opportunity if we decide to engage, if we want to leverage our collective wisdom and experiences and educations and talents. So that's a lot of what we love to do with leaders is do that. And so in your space, in that entrepreneur space, I joke that it's kind of the unwritten rule that, entrepreneurs aren't allowed to have bad days, right? I mean, do you ever feel that pressure is that, you're getting to do whatever you want to do, right? You're creative, you're driving your dream, you're getting to accomplish whatever you want to accomplish. You've got your agenda, your schedules, but where do you go and how do you sort of self-care for yourselves when it is a bad day? Because everybody has bad days, but you guys have to be really sensitive to that and recognize that, okay, if I'm not intentional about connecting with other people, then it's not going to be a healthy dynamic for you guys, right? So thinking about that, but I put a quote up here to start us off, is that we're so successful at being comfortable that comfort has become the enemy of our success. And if you're not familiar with Wim Hof, I'm going to mention some folks to you. I'm going to mention some books to you. I'd put him on your radar. I mean, he's out there. He's super, super, I mean, the guy hiked Everest in like a pair of shorts. And so, yeah, this is your guy. So, breathing methods and like.
I read about him.
Yeah, he's fascinating. I mean, yeah, can be terrifying. Allowed himself to be injected with viruses to prove that what he had trained his body to do wasn't, just, a bunch of fluff and it sounds good in a book, like literally controls his heart rate, controls his pulse rate, controls so many elements that have been thought before now to be part of the autonomic nervous system, things we can't access. Our body just does it. We can't mess with it. It's there. It's kind of like the programming, right? That's behind the scenes. You don't mess with the programming. However, he has proven that that's not always the case. Very interesting man. So anyway, this is a quote from him. I like to find folks like Wim and like you guys who are more of those forward thinkers and more of those pioneers in your ventures and in your processes. So it's just a word of caution that, and Jim Collins in his book Good to Great talks about the idea that good is the enemy of great, because there's nothing wrong with good, right? Good is okay. We're making sales, we're hitting our numbers, we're hitting our metrics, customers are happy, and it's good and it's comfortable, right? And we like to be comfortable. The vast majority of folks don't like change because we like comfort. You guys are typically not in that space, because usually when I ask people, do you like change, there's about 10% of the room that'll raise their hands, and typically it's your visionary pioneer type folks who do like change. They thrive on change and look forward to it, and it's not something that they fear, unlike the majority of the population who does typically fear change. But recognizing that, okay, if we're leading, there's the price tag for that. And we'll jump forward here a little bit. So here's a warning for you. If you get too busy with your job to grow, your influence and your leadership will stagnate and ultimately evaporate. So just a little disclaimer before we get started. And the price tag of what we're talking about here with servant leadership, if I ask you, what do you think the price tag is of servant leadership? And that's sort of where we base a lot of our philosophy off of, is this idea of servant leadership model. So you hear me talk about that. But what would you think if I just asked you, what do you think the price tag of servant leadership is?
Time, for one.
Time? Okay. Yeah. There's an investment, right? So that could be an element to it. What else do you think? There's no right or wrong answers. There's no test later. Safe space. Energy? Yeah. That would be a definite component of it, for sure.
Would you discuss the networking aspect and just connections?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, maybe it's kind of hard to put a price tag on it.
Yep. Yep. So the way I've structured this particular element of it is what I put down as self-discipline. So in this context, the price tag of servant leadership is self-discipline. Because if we expect others to follow us as leaders, and here's a litmus test for you. If you think you're leading and you look behind you and nobody's following you, are you really leading, or are you just taking a hike? You might just be out on the trail. You might be a pioneer, but a pioneer does not, correlate necessarily with a leader. So this idea of, okay, if I'm going to expect people to follow me, then there's a degree of modeling involved in that, right? So if I want to lead others well, that starts with leading myself well. All right. So am I modeling am I walking the talk, in other words? So am I modeling what I'm expecting those that I'm asking to follow me, the expectation is? A lot of it is expectation management. I'm a big fan of role clarity and expectation management. If I'm asking somebody to do something, I need to be as clear as possible. We talked about this a couple of months ago when we did a workshop at Summit, creating clarity, especially in our day and time where the rate of change around us is happening so quickly. It's almost impossible to over communicate clarity to your team, people that you're leading, people that you're working with, because there's so many things that are competing for our attention, right? I mean, it's our phones, it's our watches, it's our spouse, it's our kids, it's our employees, it's our what. You have no shortage of things demanding your attention. So how do we create clarity for those that we're expecting to perform in a certain way, or to do a task, or to an outcome, if you will? So making really, really sure that, one, I'm leading myself well, and I'm modeling what I'm expecting them to do, but I've also created clarity around that expectation. Because it's hard to hold somebody accountable for something they never agreed to, right? You ever been in that situation? Have you been held accountable for something you never asked to be held accountable for? Yeah, not healthy, right? And that's so much of what we talk about is creating a healthy organizational culture. That's what we love to help people figure out and get to that point where drama is low, communication is high, turnover is low, morale is high. So these kind of things, that the soft skills of leading an organization and people development. So focusing on self-discipline, your self-care, back to caring for yourself well. Just because you hear it, you've heard it said for years that if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life, right? Which is great. I encourage people to do that. Find out, what are you passionate about? What are your skill sets? What are your talents? What do you get towards? And get in that lane, right? Well, that's great. And for you guys, creativity is a lot of that, right? Creativity is a lot of your giftedness, and that is sort of your sweet spot. But that's also your vocation in a lot of times, a lot of situations. So does your creativity have an outlet beyond just the vocation? So how are you doing some self-care that, yeah, you may love what you do, but are you being intentional about modeling and setting up systems that are, one, sustainable for you, because it's not helpful for anybody if you're burnt out and overwhelmed and stressed out and fatigued. That's not good for your organization. It's not good for your family dynamic. It's not good for anything. So this idea of self-discipline and self-care first and foremost, and I spend time on that initially because I know my experience with entrepreneurs has been that's a danger, right? There's a warning there that often doesn't go very well communicated or doesn't get explained fully. And for you guys to feel like you have that authority, you in your space, you don't have a boss that would be the one to tell you, you need to do this, this, and this as far as these things are concerned. These are going to be based on you owning that part of it. Say, okay, I need to be disciplined here, or I need to give myself some grace and some latitude in these areas, or I need to have some white space in my calendar so that, I'm not just running from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting. There's some time in there to breathe. There's some time in there to process. There's some time in there to reflect. But if you don't do that, it doesn't happen, right? It's just the reality of it. So this idea of the price tag being servant leadership being self-discipline, a couple of truths I'm going to hit you with really quickly, and I want to honor our time. We're here till 1, is that right? Okay. We want to have some Q&A time too. So truth number 1, growth always brings complexity. You got to embrace that. Just the reality of where you are. So if you're looking to grow your organization, if you're looking to grow your team, if you're looking to grow your family, growth always brings complexity. It's just a reality of living on planet Earth. So what do we do with that? If we know that, what do we do with that? So here's an idea for you. So this is not original to me, but this is talking about the idea of the tyranny of the urgent. So you got a 4-quadrant matrix here, important and urgent. So sweet spot for us as leaders is finding out how do we stay in quadrant 2 the majority of the time, because you're going to be constantly pulled into quadrant 1, 3, and 4, because there again, you're leading, you're doing things that an entrepreneur does. So being able to recognize as quickly as possible what you're dealing with and which quadrant it falls in will allow you to make a decision on how you move forward. So hitting the pause button long enough to hold space to say, okay, is this important? Yes or no? And then is it urgent or not urgent? And where does that, where do I fall in that spectrum, on that matrix? Where am I at any given time? And then making a decision, right? How do I get back to that green quadrant as quickly as possible? Not to say you're not ever going to have to deal with these things, because you will. That's just, there again, reality. And it's part of that complexity that comes with growth. But when you find yourself in those other quadrants, having the awareness, having the self-awareness, because there again, a lot of times this isn't going to come from the top, because you are the top. How do I pause and say, okay, where am I, and how do I get back to this as quickly as possible? Because that quadrant 2 quality time that's your highest and best use, right? So I love the saying. It's by Andy Stanley. It's not original to me, but it's a saying that says, only do what only you can do. And that sounds kind of trippy at first, but only do what only you can do. This is your goal as a leader and as you grow your organization. Because right now, you are wearing lots of hats. And the earlier you are in this process, the more hats you're wearing. One of the exercises we love to do with business leaders is have them build an org chart We used to do it for like 3 and 5 years out, but that's way out there anymore. So we just kind of go about a year out right now. In a year from now, what do you need your organization to look like to accomplish, your strategic plan and your values and your mission and your vision? What does the organization need to look like? Build out that org chart. And right now, your name and your leadership team, if it's 1 or 2 or 3 of you, is going to be basically in every box. But your job over the next year or 18 months, however long you forecast that out, is to begin to replace yourself in as many of those boxes as possible with things that someone else can and probably should be doing. So taking the time to assess and say, okay, what are the things that I, as the founder, as the visionary, as the entrepreneur, can only do? All right, because there's only certain things you can do. There's only certain questions you can answer. There's only certain decisions you can make. There's only certain roles. If you want to zoom back out and make this, bigger picture, there's only you're the only one that can be a spouse, right? If you're married, you're the only one, right? You're the only dad or the mom to kids that you may have, right? You're the only son or daughter to your parents. So there's certain roles that only you can do. And why would we trade something that's temporary that somebody else can and eventually will do, right? Because none of us are going to live forever, and hopefully our companies will live well beyond us. So eventually somebody can and will do what we're doing for something that only we can do. They're in a bigger picture, but if we simplify that down or boil that down to your day-to-day, are you in your space? Are you in your lane and making decisions that only you can make and doing things that only you can do? All right, and that may not be possible right now, but that's a goal. That's an objective that you're working towards, so that if somebody can make that decision or can do that task or can execute on that, then they are, and you're giving them the authority to do that. So here's a quick litmus test for you to decide, am I creating leaders or am I creating followers? You ready for the litmus test? It's what are you delegating? So are you delegating tasks or are you delegating responsibility? Because if you're just delegating tasks, you're creating followers. And that's ultimately not what you want to do, because that's not going to get you where you want to go. You want to create leaders, so you got to delegate responsibility to people, right? People like to know that they have some degree of autonomy, right? They have some degree of responsibility for something that they can feel like they're making a difference with. They're putting their fingerprints on, their DNA is in it. Because what people help you build, they take ownership of, that's what we want, right? We want people to take that degree of ownership where they feel, the losses and the wins and the successes and the failures, it's all this living, breathing organism dynamic together in this culture that we built, of a healthy organizational culture. But does that make sense? Does that resonate with where you are, with what's going on? So figuring out, how do you get there? And it takes time, especially if you're on the very front end of this thing. But you just have to keep that out there. It's on the horizon. It's on your radar. That as the organization grows, as I'm adding team members, as I'm adding layers, how do I begin to take things off of my plate that I don't need to be doing, right? It's not this quadrant 2. It's not your highest and best use of your time, because there's only things that only you can do. And that's where you got to be, because until you can focus there, your organization is not going to grow. It's not going to scale. It's not going to have the success that you ultimately want it to have, and it ultimately can have, or it'll just take you a lot longer. You might still get there, but it might take you, twice or 3 times as long if you're not orienting yourself in this way. So yeah, tyranny of the urgent, you got to fight it because it's not natural. Franklin Covey is one who came up with this particular diagram, did a great job of it. So next, truth, you ready? Truth number 2, our friends determine the quality and direction of our lives. And you can input somewhat of your team in that, our team, because most of us spend more time with our teams than we even do with our own families a lot of times, especially if you're in a startup phase, right? I mean, you're putting a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and energy into this thing. So our friends determine the quality and direction of our lives. You've seen this. If you have kids, you definitely feel this. And that's why our parents were so protective about who we spent time around, because they knew it. Because most of the time you learn these things the hard way. But our friends, or some quote unquote, our team, determine the direction and quality of our life. So this is just more of a truth to say, be intentional about who you're willing to give your time and your energy and your attention to, because it will ultimately have an effect on where you go and where you wind up. So anyway, just there. So here's the way I do this. So mentors plus encouragers plus mentees equal better leaders. If you want a formula to how to be a better leader, this is a really good one. So mentors, who do you have in your life that is further ahead of you on the journey than you are, that you have been intentional about building a relationship with? If you don't have any, then that's a good starting point. So finding somebody, it can be in the same industry, doesn't have to be, but somebody who you aspire to have either the degree of success they've had or the platform or the influence, whatever it is, that is somewhere that you want to be, that you can reach out to and say, hey, what would it look like for us to, if they're not local, jump on a Zoom call once a month, or, me to send you emails. If they are local, what's it look like for me to take you out, for coffee and you pay for it? Let's grab coffee at Open Doors or wherever, and let's just chat and let me pick your brain a little bit about where I am and the challenges I'm facing, because I know you've probably hit some of these same landmines that I'm potentially going to hit in these roadblocks and these pitfalls. And so it's just a reality that you've heard it said before, that experience is the best teacher, right? Anybody ever heard that? Experience is the best teacher. I push back against that a little bit, because just because you've had an experience doesn't guarantee that you've learned from that experience. Anybody ever had the same failure more than once? And so you've been there. Doesn't guarantee you've learned from it. So that's not necessarily the best teacher. I would say evaluated experience is a better teacher. So you've had the experience, and then you pause long enough to evaluate that experience. Okay, what did I learn? What went well? What did we do poorly? What do we need to improve on? Taking the time to evaluate that experience, that's helpful. That's the next step. But what I would tell you, sort of the pinnacle of that, is evaluating others' experiences. Because in doing that, you don't have to spend your most precious asset, and that's time. We might think that it's money or it's cars or it's whatever. No, your most precious resource is your time, because you can never get it back. So how can you learn from others' experiences so that you don't have to have that experience yourself to evaluate it, right? So part of that is building these relationships with these mentors to say, hey, when you were in my position, when you were dealing with, this contract or these types of negotiations or this situation, how did you handle that? What did you do? And that's, it takes time. It's a relationship, right, that you're asking these folks to potentially engage with you in. Not everybody's going to be interested in that. I've had people I've asked, and they just said, I don't have the margin for that. I'm sorry. Would love to, potentially maybe later, but right now I just don't have the margin, and that's okay. I'd rather somebody tell me that on the front end, right, than tell me yes, but me never be able to get time with them. They don't return my emails, or they never answer my call or text, and so was that really a win? No. I'd rather them be honest with me on the front end. So don't take that as a bad thing if somebody tells you that. But being intentional about finding those people who can pour into you and add value to you, and see the value in that themselves. So looking for mentors. Encouragers are people who, when you have bad days, and you're going to have them, that you can go to, and they are not the misery loves company crowd. They're the people that are going to let you vent. They're going to let you talk about what's going on, but they're also going to help you do some problem solving, right? They're going to help you brainstorm some solutions, and they're going to encourage you not to quit, not to give up. You're doing a good work. You're well suited for this. Look at the past successes. Are going to help remind you of things that have happened in the past that we typically can tend to forget, because by human nature, what we do is we stick our wins in our pockets and we put our losses in our hearts, right? And that's just part of the reality of the human experience. So they're going to help you remember some of those wins that you've stuffed down in your pocket and you forgot along the way, right? They're going to encourage you. So having those people in your life that you can go to when it's really hard and it's dark and you're depressed and you're frustrated, and you've got to build those relationships. You've got to have those people in your life. The flip side of that coin is, who are you an encourager to? Right? Because we all have that ability. If we're in a relationship with folks, have we made ourselves available to folks in our sphere of influence to say, hey, when you're having a bad day, let me take you out for coffee, or let me help you remember, some of these things that you've been through and you've come through and that you've been resilient around. Are we being encouragers? Have we made ourselves available to fill that role for somebody else that we have that would add value? And then the third one are mentees. So who are we being mentors to? Who have we said or made ourselves available to that are behind us on the journey. We're ahead of them, and may not be far ahead of them. And this doesn't have to be an age thing. I've had mentors of mine that have been younger. I've had people that have approached me about being a mentee that are older than me. And that's sometimes awkward, but I mean, I'm honored. But yeah, we will figure it out. But it's somebody that's there again, you're ahead of them on the journey to whatever degree, that's fine. But you have made yourself able to say, hey, call me, text me, let me know what you need. I'll help you any way that I can. And my sort of catchphrase for this is do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. Do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. And I put this in the context of mentoring with Rise Up. It's a local nonprofit organization here, and they connect sort of at-risk youth with mentors in the community to sort of show these folks a different path that may be available to them if they choose to engage. But I can't do that for everybody. I can't do that for the 50 kids that are in their program. I can't give all 50 of those kids my cell phone number and my home address, and I can't pick them all up after school, and I can't, go and pick them up at 2 a.m. when they get kicked out of their house, and I can't do that. But I can do it for one, or I can do it for Dylan, and I can allow Dylan to reach out to me whenever he needs me and build a relationship with him and his grandparents, and try to, there again, just help him along the way, and be there when he needs me. So who have we offered ourselves up to be a mentee, or for a mentee to be able to engage with us? And there again, same reality. What do you have available? What's your capacity? And only you know that. Only you can answer that. But if you'll do that, if you'll run that equation in your life throughout your life, it's gonna make you a better leader, and I promise you'll get to the end of the game, and you won't be disappointed with the things you've been able to accomplish. So that's how to address that truth number 2. So truth number 3, direction, not intention, determines destination. Direction, not intention, determines destination. How many of you guys have good intentions? Not good, right? We all do, right? But if I get out here, let's say I've got intentions to go to, I'm going to go scuba diving in the Keys this weekend. So I pack my gear, I got my tank, I got my regulator, I got everything ready, I got my suit, and I get on 81 and I head north. Am I ever going to get to the Keys? I have great intentions. I planned for it. I got everything ready. I'm good. I'm ready. I'm excited. I've called all my friends. I'm going to meet them down there. Right? I had great intentions. Planned accordingly. Put everything together. But if I can get on 81 and go north, I'm never, ever going to reach the Florida Keys. So my direction just trumped all of my intentions. So in your life, what direction are you setting? 1, for you around that self-discipline, and then 2, for your team, right? Are we creating a clear direction for our team to follow and our team to go in, so that when we reach our destination, we're not surprised when we started seeing road signs that said Washington, D.C., 50 miles ahead? Well, why is that sign there? Like, I'm going to Florida. Not heading north on 81, you're not going to Florida. So direction, not intention, determines destination. Anybody ever experienced that? Does that resonate at all? Yeah, it's probably all to some degree, but there again, just trying to put some framework around where you are in your world. So how do we engage with this? For me, I like this quote by the Osario tribe. It says, knowledge is only rumor until it lives in the bones. Knowledge is only rumor until it lives in the bones. And part of what that speaks to is this idea that there's a difference between knowledge and wisdom. So for me, wisdom is the application of the knowledge, right? It's great that we have the data. It's great that we have the facts. It's great that we have the knowledge. But until it lives in our bones, it's just sort of out there. It's just sort of it's a tool. But if it's not used, then we never move to the wisdom element. And so for this, we've got to mind the gaps. And this is, there again, something only you can do. Back to self-discipline. Mind the gaps. What I mean by that is there's a gap for all of us between knowing and doing. We all know more than we do. It's just the reality. Sometimes that gap is really, really narrow. We're firing on all cylinders. We're well aligned with our team. We're well aligned with our values. Things are going well. Other times that gap's a little wider. And what we know to do is not always what we do. Right? So, and there again, this is a gap that only you know, right? Because you know what you know, you know what you don't know, you know what you've learned along the way, you know what's applicable, you know the timing. So we got to mine that gap to make sure it's always going to be there. You're never going to eliminate it, but how are we mining it between what we know and what we do, right? And what's relevant in the moment and maybe what's not in real time. You're making real time adjustments, you're calibrating, you're recalibrating, you're refocusing so that that gap, you're keeping that gap as narrow as you possibly can, right? And you're applying as much of the knowledge that you have and turning it into wisdom because you're making decisions based on that knowledge, right? And you're basing it either on your experiences or those evaluated experiences of others who have been where you want to go and who you've asked to pour into you in that way, right? So kind of building as we go. So finding those gaps. I want to keep going, be sensitive to your time. So what's a team? We want to talk about team building. A team is kind of a generic definition, but it's typically a small group of people that work together towards a common goal. That's a team. So how do you effective teams are measured? Typically by trust, mutual accountability, and by working together, they achieve more than they could working as individuals. Right. So at some point you've realized, okay, if I want to grow, if I want to scale, I've got to have a team. I need more people, right? I need more experience. I need more hands. I need more brain power. I need more capacity. So I got to build a team. So if this is what we're building, we're defining it that way. Let's talk about teams because that's a big piece. Got any Pink Floyd fans in the room? So what we're going to talk about here is back to our definition. Is I love it. What's this? Scam Likely. Colin loved that. The first time I saw it, I was like, Sam Likely? Who's Sam? Oh no, never mind. So the first thing all teams are built to achieve results. At the end of the day, you're pulling together a team because you need to achieve results, right? And you can achieve greater results with a better team, with a higher performance team. So that's the reality. Our focus of every team, good, bad, world class, superstars, they're all built and focused around results. That's the end of the day. The foundation of a great team is talent. So I tell people all the time, if you're hiring, hire for talent. Hire for talent, look for talent. These are sort of those innate skills that people just have, right? You can develop talent, but I'm not convinced that you can impute talent, but you can see it. You know, we talk about it in athletics. Boy, they've got such raw talent. You know, you see it in a 13 or 14-year-old, you just know, man, they're going to go a long way because they've got just that raw talent, that potential, they've got that. So you're hiring for talent. That's sort of the foundation of your team is the talent. The left side of that pyramid are the skills that it takes to do it, right? This is developing that talent. These are learning the job skills, the specific tools you need to do to achieve the results that you're after, right? At Chick-Fil-A, when I worked there, I used to tell anybody, I can teach anybody to fry chicken. It ain't rocket science. I mean, it's a pressure cooker. You put some chicken in it, you hit the button, 7 minutes later, you got fried chicken. I can teach anybody to do that. That's not what made Chick-fil-A and what makes Chick-fil-A great is not doing that, right? That's not it. So in Mark Miller's book, he's the executive, or what is he now? Executive Vice President of Training and Development for Chick-fil-A, a great friend. He wrote a book called The Secret of Teams. And that's where this diagram comes from. So all teams have these dynamics at play. They're all focused on results, they're built on talent, and they have the skill set to do the job, right? These are good teams. These are average teams. These maybe even bad teams, but they all have them. The differentiator between a good team and a high performance team, which is the goal, that's what we're after, is this idea of community. That's the differentiator, community. So let's define that. I'm going to try to quickly for you. So community is where genuine care and concern are expressed for every member of the team. You want to talk about, you guys familiar with Warren Buffett, right? The great investor and guru and all that. So what he looks for when he buys a company is what he calls a durable competitive advantage. If he's going to buy a company or he's going to invest, he wants it to have a durable competitive advantage. You want to talk about a durable competitive advantage? If you focus on community, you will have a differentiator in the marketplace. No doubt about it. It's just the reality. If you have a culture where genuine care and concern are expressed for every member of the team, that's what makes up. That's the key to a high performance team right there. I mean, I've seen it time and time again. We can talk about examples of companies we've seen or we've experienced, we've done it. It's that idea that even when I'm not in the room, right? I might be 100 miles away. I'm not even in the room, but I still trust that the people that are in that room making those decisions have my best interest in mind, even without me being there. Do we have that degree of trust? Do we have that degree of transparency? Do we have that degree of ownership? That's what we're talking about with community, right? So that's our goal. That's what we want to try to get to. If we want a high performance team, if we want a world-class team, we have to, but this doesn't happen by accident, right? You don't just coast or drift to having community. You have to, as you guys talked about earlier, you have to invest energy, you have to invest time, you have to be willing to be vulnerable, right? We have to be willing to model this, right? If the leader doesn't model this, good luck having the team run with community without the leader championing community. It starts with us. So in this idea of teamwork. So Patrick Lencioni wrote a book a couple of years ago called The Ideal Team Player. This is what I want to kind of wrap up with you with. There's 3 components that he describes of an ideal team player. They're humble, they're hungry, and they're smart. These are the 3 attributes of an ideal team player. And what he means by smart is not necessarily IQ. He's talking more about EQ here. So it's emotional intelligence, not necessarily intellect. So what you have, though, if you have gaps of these, let's say you have one out of 3. Like if I'm just humble, then he calls that the pawn. If they're not necessarily hungry or smart in an EQ standpoint, they're just humble, they can easily be a pawn. If they're hungry, but not humble or smart, they can be a bulldozer, right? Because they're hungry. They want the money, they want the sales, they want the contract, but they're going to plow through whatever they need to in the meantime to get there, right? If I'm smart, but not necessarily humble or hungry, then I'm the charmer, right? Not a lot of work happening, can tend to be all about me, but they have the EQ smart, so they know how to work a crowd and how to work people. So that's if you've got 1. Now let's take it to the next layer. What if you got 2 out of 3? So let's talk about this green at the top. If I'm humble and hungry, but not EQ smart, I'm an accidental mess maker, right? Because I'm hungry, I want the stuff, and I've got the humility, but I have no idea how to talk to people, how to communicate. I'm socially awkward, and I just walk around, and people just know, oh, that was John. We know, that's just the way he does and what happens. We got to clean up behind him a little bit, and it's not always neat and tidy and pretty. If I'm hungry and smart, this is the most dangerous of the 2. This is who you really got to look out for, because that's your skillful politician, is what Patrick Lencioni calls this position, this person. This is the person that you walk away from a meeting, or you walk away from an experience with this person, and you look down and you're bleeding from like 3 places, and you have no idea where it even came from, right? Because they're very smart from an EQ standpoint, and they're hungry, but they have no humility at all. It's all about them getting ahead no matter what price they have to pay, right? And if we go around to the last one, if we have that EQ smarts and we're humble, but we're not hungry, then we're kind of this lovable slacker. Not a whole lot of results happening, but great people, right? You love to have them on your team. They're great for the culture. They're the life of the party. People love them. They're genuine. They're sincere. They connect well because they've got the EQ skills, but they have no real drive. And so you just wind up with this kind of lovable slacker dynamic. But all 3 of those working together creates the ideal team player. Humble, hungry, and smart from an EQ standpoint, when smart's what we're talking about. So when we're hiring team players, he says everyone is sincere in their desire for team players. Nobody's disingenuous about wanting these people, but there's a disconnect between that desire and what actually happens within companies. He says, so we have to change the hiring process. Yes, people have to have the technical skills, right? We talked about that in the pyramid. You got to have the skills, right, to do the job. But generally, those are overemphasized while we only give lip service to the behavioral elements. So what do we do about that? A couple things we can do. 2, take people out of the office during interviews. If you're interviewing somebody and you've got them in a boardroom in a static environment, and you're only seeing them through that one facet, through that one lens, you're not getting the whole picture. He says, get them out of the boardroom, get them out of the office, go to lunch, go grab coffee, see them interact in the real world. How do they handle people? How do they handle disruptions? He gave the example of one CEO that when he was looking at hiring for his executive team, he would take them to lunch, but before he would go, he'd call the restaurant and talk to the waiter or waitress and tell them to intentionally mess the person's order up that he's bringing to lunch, right? Intentionally, just to see how they would handle that situation? You know, how would they treat that server in that situation? Would they berate them? Would they have to be graceful? Would they, you know, how would that dynamic go to get a view into how this person thinks? How do they operate? What do they, you know, they may say their values are all these great things, but in reality, how does that play out in their day-to-day life? So anyway, these are a little more practical, but ask questions more than once. If in your gut you're asking somebody about something and you don't feel like you're really getting, you know, the truth, or you're getting the breakthrough that you're looking for, don't let up. Listen to that still small voice inside of you that says there may be something more here that I need to dig into. So don't ignore that. Keep pressing, keep pressing, keep pressing. Number 4, stop doing siloed interviews. At Chick-Fil-A, we would interview 14-year-old frontline employees 3 times. Everybody, no matter who you were, you at least got 3 interviews. Even if this might be your first job, and all you're going to do is, you know, you're going to make drinks and make milkshakes, but you're going to get 3 interviews with 3 different people, because we wanted to see, were we seeing the same things from this person in our leadership team, or were there some flags that we need to follow back up on to drill down deeper into, so that we knew, or we had the best sense that we could possibly have of what we were hiring, who we were hiring, their alignment with our values and the way we wanted to run our organization. So, right, because back to the point of, you're going to spend a whole lot of time with these folks, and the people that you surround yourself with are going to determine the quality and the direction of your life, right? So stop doing silo interviews. And then he says, scare people with sincerity. So if that's part of your culture, don't hide it. Like, be genuine, be who you are in your day-to-day life in those interviews when you're interacting with these people, to let them know sincerely, what are they getting into? And what are they signing up for? You know, this is who we are. This is what we believe. We believe in hard work. We believe in, you know, going the extra mile. We believe in these things, and let them see that at play in your dynamic when you're meeting with them, when you're trying to onboard them potentially within the organization. So a little bit more tactical about how you do this with team members. And I would tell you, hire for 3 C's. And this is a Chick-fil-A ism. You hire for competency, you hire character, and you hire for chemistry. But which one do you think is most important in a team dynamic?
Character.
Okay. Character is important.
Everything flows from character. So, yeah.
Yep. But in a team dynamic, you hire for chemistry. If you're going to work siloed, yes. You know, ideally, we want all 3 of these, right? But if we have to prioritize them in a team environment, they can have the amazing skill set, right? They've got the competency down pat, no doubt about it. They can build tables faster and more efficiently and more beautiful than anybody I've ever seen. And they do what they say they're going to do, right? They have character. If they tell me they're going to be in at 9 o'clock, they're in at 8:58. You tell me they're going to have the table done by Tuesday, it's done by Tuesday. All that can be great. But if you can't interact with people, if you can't get along with other people in a team dynamic, all that other stuff goes out the window. Because you are so interdependent, especially at this stage when you're building that team. You have no extra parts, right? Everybody you're inviting onto the team at this point plays a critical role within your organization. There has to be unity around that team. There has to be the ability to communicate and work together and build a healthy culture. So if you don't have chemistry, you're in trouble in a team environment. So let's see what else we got in here. So here's your real takeaway. I think this is the last slide. So is this surprising if I told you that high performance teams aren't the goal after everything I've told you so far? So everything we've built, right, this high performance team, that's not the goal of what you're trying to achieve, right? Back to the beginning. The goal is sustained performance over time. High performance team are a strategy to get and sustain amazing results. Results are your real goal, right? So there you have it. I know that's a lot. So there's my information. If anybody, you can feel free to take a picture of that, or Ro, or any of the guys here have my information. So if I can do anything to serve you further, or if you have any other questions, these are the things that we'd love to do through Summit. We're a leadership development organization, and we want to figure out how we can add value in those ways. But with all that being dumped in your lap, we don't talk about now. Then let me
If
take
anyone have any questions, just feel free to jump in. One thing I always felt was very hard, and it is like still, hard to a degree, is, delegating.
Yeah.
And doing that well. And I remember at the start of like starting to have a team, the hardest thing was, it's like it's a whole mindset shift from, oh, hey, this needs to get done, I'm going to do it, to, oh, this needs to get done, this person could help me make it happen, but I know how to do it. Am I going to like teach them how to do it, but then I'm gonna do it as well? So I'm just going to do it. And it was like very hard to just to go like to push through that. So do you have any, I guess, practical steps and
I mean, that's you're describing, the typical tragedy, and a lot of times of a founder or entrepreneur lid, right? Because you become the lid of the organization. The organization will never grow beyond that. It can't, right? Because you're not willing to hand over the ability to the other people that can help you grow the organization, because you want to control. It's called the genius with 1,000 helpers, is what Jim Collins calls it in his book, the genius with 1,000 helpers. So realizing that, okay, if I want to grow the organization, if I want to scale, I'm going to have to hand off things on my plate to other people. Now, are they going to do it exactly like I would do it? Probably not. Are they going to have the exact same outcome that I would have? Probably not. But you've got to establish a threshold at which you're comfortable with. Is it 80%, of the way you would do it, or what the result you would get? Is it 90%? Is it 75%? Where's that threshold that you're comfortable with? I know they're not going to do it the way I would do it. Maybe not as efficiently, maybe not as effectively. But if it's 85% the way that I would do it and the outcome I would have, I'm comfortable with that, and I can roll with that. That's doable, especially out of the gate. Right now, they're going to learn, and things they'll get better at it. It's just like anything. We get better at what we practice and what we do. But initially establishing the fact, okay, I'm not going to hand them something that's going to sink the ship. I'm not going to. They're going to take the founder title and put it on them and let them make decisions that would ultimately bankrupt us or put us in that position. So you've already limited a number of options that they're going to have available to them. But when you define and decide, okay, these are things I can let go of, and so that I can focus on only what I can do, then I'm comfortable with that being 75% of the outcome I would get, or 80 or 85. But you have to define what that threshold is, and then realize that, okay, I'm going to be okay with that. I'm not going to micromanage them. I'm not going to hold it over their head for that other 15% or 10% or 20%, whatever that threshold is. And I'm going to coach them, though, right? That's part of that mentoring. That's part of that development of your team, is giving them constructive feedback, coaching them, not berating and tearing down. But once you've got trust established, and part of this is establishing trust, right? If I'm an employee of yours and I know that you've been doing something since you started the organization and you're willing to let me take it over, right? That instills trust in me, right? I appreciate that. When I first came to this market from Florida, moved up from Florida with Starbucks, the regional vice president that I had at that time, I was going to go into another store in another region, and he said, well, I'd actually like you to take over Johnson City and open the East Tennessee market. At that point, Johnson City was his highest volume store. I think it was the third in the state. And I said, if you trust me with that degree of responsibility, I'd love to have that opportunity. And so him imputing that trust to me made me take more ownership, right? It made me take a greater sense of pride in versus just going into maybe the third highest or fourth on his list or district. And we did. I mean, we ended up growing Johnson City to the #1 volume store in the state. It's great. But so if I want to build trust in my team, that's one way to build trust, and that's the foundation that everything else is built upon. Is we didn't talk about the dysfunctions of a team, but without trust, everything else you build is at risk. And subject to collapse at any time if you don't have trust at the end of the day. So
yeah, I was just recently called out on this too, with all the changes happening through funding, COVID and everything, and lack of contractors. My immediate reaction to that was, okay, like we're close to for the next milestone we've been shooting for a while. My reaction was, all right, we built this ourselves early on. I can just do this. And it was kind of that I was taking over all of the control of everything we're doing. It was like, I don't need anybody else. I can make this happen, and then we'll rebuild after that. And I talked to Spencer, who's and he runs Podkick, one of our local entrepreneurs, and he's like, what's your plan with this? What are you gonna do? And going back to your kind of mentorship piece, is what the people I reach out to, and he's definitely an encourager as well. But I've also noticed entrepreneurs are very hard nosed about like, what are you doing? Like they're very give you great feedback, and remember I told him that, and in a much friendlier way, he basically said that this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Like, you're gonna burn yourself out. You're probably not gonna get it done. You're already doing too much. And kind of speaking to your point, he said, look, if you actually want to build this up, you have to start asking from, instead of saying, I will do this first, and like, or this is how it's going to get done, start saying who can I use to do it? So it's always who, not how.
Or even what.
That, what's up?
Yeah, or even what, turning every what question into a who question.
Absolutely. And that's his big thing. He automates tasks. He puts in, like, he's just like the process guy, right? Like, it's some of the stuff just seems over the top ridiculous, and then you see what it does for it, like, okay, but like, I would argue they go a little too deep into this app connects to this, and I get an email, but he is phenomenal at it. And it just made me rethink that. And so my new approach was actually reaching out, getting new subcontractors, an intern. And then instead of spending all this time building it the way I know I could, I spent more time designing it to make it easier on them to accomplish it. And so it feels so much better. Like, that's why I'm here today, not just in front of a computer. It's, I truly think it's going to be more successful, because as founders, I think we jump into things sometimes and just either fully consume it and don't let anybody else in, or we love to jump in thinking we got this, and then we completely screw it all up too. So.
Yeah, that, and there's an African proverb that says, and it's so true, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Right? And that's the reality of where you guys are. So it's only hurting your organization, your dream, and your vision in the long run. And also, I'll tell you this, high performers don't stay in that environment. If you've hired very talented, high performing people, they're not going to stay in an organization where they're continually bumping their head on the lid, right? Or they may, usually they won't, usually they'll just leave. But they may, and this is even worse, is they'll just begin to settle, right? They won't challenge, they won't push, they won't, you'll get 60% of their capacity out of them, productivity out of them, because they just settle. They realize there's no point, right? Because that's never going to change. And so, yeah, toxic. What else?
I think one of my recent struggles is determining like a ratio between savings, earnings, reinvestment in the company, and how all of that feels like a bubble of success or not success. It's hard to know, because like last year was spent not making a penny, basically.
Right.
And this year, it's like you really want to make a good profit, but yet you also don't want to neglect your company by, I guess, being selfish in a sense. But then, you put all the money back into the company and it feels like less success as far as the value of going out and getting a job, that pays a normal salary,
Your time.
Yeah.
But you're the one taking all the risk, right?
Right.
And so that's part of the risk reward dynamic. And so, at the end of the day, at the very end of the day, when you put your head on your pillow, you're the only one there laying down at night. How do you define success? That's what matters. And the more important thing is, have you clarified that for yourself? Have you defined that, or have you allowed somebody else to define that for you, and you just bought into it? Because so often we just do that. We just assume somebody else's beliefs or definitions, and without challenging those. And so I would challenge you to say, do you have a personal definition of success? And what is that for you? And you can get as granular with that as you want to. You can break it out in as many facets as you want to. I can have a personal definition of success for my family. I can have a personal definition of success for my business, for my personal life. For me, I'll give you an example, and this is not original to me. I've morphed it out of somebody else's, but it's those that know me the best love and respect me the most. For me, that's my own personal definition of success. And so it keeps me accountable to those in my inner circle, right? So my spouse, my kids, my family. Because it's one thing to come here and connect with you guys, and I enjoy that, and I love that. if this has been great and added value, that you have a perception of me from that. But if I base my self-worth and my reality out of that, which is my own caution, because I'm a people person, then I'd allow that to be my definition of success, then I'm in trouble, right? And so, and I'll tell you, I mean, part of that is back into your mentor, encourager, mentee model. And that's why I go back to that with people, with leaders so often, is have I used some of that to clarify what is success for me? So when you put your head on your pillow at night, how do you know it's been a good day? Right? This was a successful day. And this is what I can point back to that quantifies that for me. If that's helpful or not.
It's like on your question, Justin, I can definitely relate quite a bit because, especially at the start of Action VFX, it's really, I mean, you're not even thinking about profits yet. It's more, hey, every bit that can go into this thing needs to go into it. And for me personally, the way I manage that balance is I get very familiar with how much I actually need to live. And really go into detail, like okay, like
indoors, live indoors.
Yes.
Just clarify.
Smart to clarify.
Yes. Definitely how much I could still have a place to live, but like really get down to okay, how much savings do I have? How could, and once I really understood my very baseline, it was a lot more freeing in the sense that it could be okay, so then you start thinking of what are the strategies to maximize every spending to accomplish the goals of the business. It would be okay. Like I remember they brought on two people, which was Luke and then another, guy shortly afterwards. And I remember for a while, I was taking zero money for myself out of the business, but it was a calculated risk. Like, hey, I know like having people on your team can help you go far. So it's like, okay, well, I know I'm not going to be homeless next couple months. So and there's no specific, one way to do it. But I did find that once I knew what I could actually afford to lose, it did free me a lot more to, have more just clarity and peace about putting things into the business and actually investing on the front end. So not sure if that helps, but that was kind of what I was dealing with.
Yeah. And I can say getting married makes that more complicated. When I was in college and I could just work and I could live like in this tiny little box basically.
Ramen noodles.
Yeah, ramen, that was high.
That was a treat.
Yeah. I remember starting a business. I think I was working at it when I had student loans and other stuff too, but I was making like $14,000 a year, which is pretty hard to live on. Only certain ways to live.
$1,100 a month.
College, right? But also when things really took off for me, I remember just being so excited. I would watch my savings account and I'd be like, wow, I got so much money. At the time, it was just like normal money, right? But I was just like, oh, this is so amazing. But I like to watch it grow and not actually pay off my student loans. And so, but I was very lucky that I was dating my now wife then, and Brooklyn looked at it and said, "What are you doing?" I was like, "It's fun to watch it grow, but that's growing too." Luckily, a lot of had good contracts, good work, business grew up, and then we were able to like pay off all the debt. And then it was like a light bulb to what you're saying. It was like, oh, if I would have done, I could have paid this off like 2 years sooner. And all that money I wasted on, that growing and paying interest is money I could have been either putting to the side for a rainy day or growth in the business. And I'll still say one of the biggest mistakes I ever made was when we were doing really well. It was mainly just me and Travis. We were killing it. We should have hired more people. I was always afraid we were going to lose this one key massive contract. And at some point it was always going to go away. We already knew that. And we got comfortable. And even though it all turned out okay, when that did go away, it was kind of this another light bulb of like, if I had invested more in the company and I had, instead of just trying to find work for the two of us, if I would have had to find work for 4 of us, things would have been very different then, because that would have been my focus. I would have been trying to find that all along. Instead, when it went away, we just didn't grow. We just continued. And then it got harder though, because we didn't have the stability. And so now I'm scrambling to make sure we have enough contracts, enough work coming in. And so we just plateaued for a really long time. And so it is always a balance, but I've heard you say it before, Ro, where figuring out your living expenses and being realistic with that, for me, it was very small, wanting to have a life and actually live and family and everything. Got to actually have that planned out. But after that, if you don't invest in the company, you'll always just be doing what you're doing. If until something bad happens, right? And so being able to put stuff aside, feel secure, and invest and build. But are you in it for the long haul, or are you in it for just while it lasts? And I've definitely done it while it lasts before, and that's painful. Then it's a scramble to grow it again.
To your point about adding more team members early, you would also have to commit to paying them early too, and that would hold you to having to have work.
Exactly.
Right.
So I would have always been trying to find, because if we were growing, I would have always been, because then I wasn't doing a lot of sales anymore.
Yeah.
We were comfortable.
So I feel like it would have motivated you to keep pushing
I would have
forward.
had no choice.
Back
but
to that
keep doing
hungry element, right?
And if you're doing that right, where if you're doing sales to a level where you can pay for an employee, you're not just breaking even with it, right?
Yeah.
You're doing enough sales to actually have profit. So if I had 4 people, I would have been getting enough work for 4 people plus profit, which then could have been invested into a 5th, which now I've got to make sure there's enough for that and more. Because when things, when contracts drop out or your product goes out or some of the market changes, you're almost in that crisis, oh crap mode. You're gonna go solve that problem. You're not gonna solve, oh man, everything's going away. I want to get back to like 30%, 50% growth. You just want to make ends meet. Like you want to hit that level, but if that level's where you've always been, it's not going to grow. Like you're stuck here. You're not actually having the chance. Now you've got to go from, plateaued to finding all this. I mean, you have to go to extraordinary measures to find work beyond that, on top of finding work just to cover your base. That's in all reality, I say that's 10 times harder than twice as hard.
Yeah, it sounds like more of a sink or swim, but
yeah, I mean, and I would argue that's half of your life as a startup. I've always, even when things were just baller, and I never use the word baller because that's how good things were. I still, at that moment, always felt that my company, and I say our company, I should never say it. It's weird for me to say that. Our company was a balloon rolling across a bed of needles, and there was like a crowd behind us and around us just cheering, and it was almost like, stop making so much noise, it's gonna pop. It was just like this fear that this great moment was just gonna be gone at all times. And that was always my fear. And that was always a driving force for me to try to do better. And so even when our big contract left, the base just closed down, there was already that notion I needed to find another one. And I found more work, but instead of 1 client, I brought like 9.
Yeah, diversified.
That's a lot harder to, which was good, but that was a lot harder to like manage and grow because there's only 2 of us at the time.
yeah, then you hire people.
Yeah, but then we were back to making it meat, and part of it I was just greedy too, so I like to see the bank account grow.
Yeah,
So and it all worked out. I've been very fortunate on that, where I've had the up and down. I've had a couple of big spikes, but I look back and say, I've been doing this almost 12 years, I think, and just kind of entrepreneurship is all. So I've started 5 companies, and the hourly rate for the time I put in is probably like $2 an hour, no matter how good I've done. I mean, it is just like you look back and you're like, after all that time. But to me, it was never about the money. It was about, I love building a team. I love working with different teams that we were able to assemble and do things. And it was just the journey of it was awesome. And even when things were doing really well, I was getting bored. And that's what actually spawned Roofon. We were bored. Both of us were like, we're doing well. Things are going great. We need to do something else. And that was just the nature of it. I know that about myself, that the success isn't necessarily coming. I really don't have a desire to ever be like a Facebook, but building out a stable, awesome team that is doing well, but also explores new ideas is kind of like the dream for me. And I think took me a long time to define it, but to your point, I think figuring that out early is very, very key.
Well, hey Matt, it is 1:20 right now, and I do want to be respectful of your time.
Sorry.
Likewise.
But hey, thank you so much for coming in. And
Yeah,
I mean, if you do want to stick around, feel free. But I do also want to be
Yeah,
mindful of
sorry.
everyone's time. So
Indeed.
this is the official end.
You can no longer see the time on it, so sorry.
This is the official end of the Founders Meetup.
Cool.
We'll
Well,
be around.
thank you so
if
much.
We
Yeah,
still have
yeah.
any pizza. Please grab some.
Yeah, there do need contact information. It was up for a little bit, but I can send it out too as well.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it,
Thank you,
guys.
Matt.
Yeah, nice to meet
Yeah,
you all.
thank you, man.
Yeah,
Awesome.
thanks for
Thank you.
engaging. Yeah.
This was great. That's a cool thing with leadership. It's like we always learn with every